The emergency lights pulsed red against the smoke that filled the lower levels of Hawkins National Laboratory. There was no warning before the steel blast doors crumpled inward like crushed soda cans. They flew off their hinges and smashed into the far wall, flattening the security station in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. A squad of military police stood in the hallway with their rifles raised, but their hands were shaking uncontrollably. They were not looking at a Russian spy or a wild animal. They were looking at a nightmare that had just been born. At the end of the corridor, a shadow moved through the haze. It was small at first, the size of a child, but it was growing with every step. The floor tiles cracked under its feet. A low, wet growl vibrated through the air, low enough to be felt in the chest bones of the soldiers. Dr. Brenner stood behind the safety glass of the observation deck on the upper level, his face pale and his notebook forgotten on the floor. He watched the monitor screens that were still working. The thermal cameras showed a body temperature that was changing rapidly, shifting from human warmth to something cold and alien. The subject was 11, but she was no longer just a girl. A glossy, black substance coated her skin like living oil. It swirled and hardened, covering her hospital gown and wrapping around her shaved head. It did not hide her. It armored her. The soldiers opened fire. The sound of automatic gunfire filled the hallway, deafening and chaotic. Hundreds of bullets flew toward the girl. In the past, she would have had to stop them with her mind, draining her energy and making her bleed. Now, she did not even raise her hand. The bullets hit the black sludge and stopped instantly. They were absorbed into the mass for a second before being spit back out onto the floor like useless pebbles. The creature that was once 11 tilted its head. White patches formed where her eyes should be, jagged and narrowed in pure rage. A mouth tore open in the black mask, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth that dripped with grey saliva. She screamed, but it was not just a scream. It was a psychic shockwave mixed with an alien roar. The sound shattered the lights overhead. The soldiers in the front row were lifted off the ground by an invisible force. But this telekinesis was different. It was darker. It was heavier. The black tendrils shot out from her back, moving faster than the soldiers could track. The tentacles grabbed the men floating in the air and slammed them into the concrete ceiling with bone-breaking force. The symbiote was feeding on the girl's high stress levels. It loved her fear. It loved her anger. It took her psychic power and gave it physical form. Usually, using her powers made 11 weak. She would get tired and her nose would bleed, but the symbiote consumed the blood. It recycled her energy. It kept her standing when she should have collapsed. She was an endless battery and it was the weapon. Dr. Brenner keyed the microphone to speak to the containment team, but all he heard was static and screams. The creature stepped over the fallen guards. It did not run. It stalked. It knew exactly where it was going. It could smell the specific chemicals in the air. It could sense the brainwaves of the people hiding in the rooms ahead. The creature paused at a heavy intersection. To the left was the exit. To the right was the elevator to the upper levels. The girl wanted to leave. She wanted to be safe. But the alien mind whispered to her. It told her they were not safe until the bad men were gone. It told her they were strong enough to stop the bad men forever. 11 turned to the right. The black liquid rippled over her shoulders, making her look twice as wide as a normal human. She raised a clawed hand toward the elevator doors. The metal groaned and peeled apart. She did not just want to escape. She wanted to hunt. The predator and the psychic had found a common goal. They were going to burn the lab down, room by room. As the creature stepped into the elevator shaft, using its claws to climb the cables, The alarms finally died out. The power had been cut. In the darkness, the only sound was the wet slithering of the suit and the terrified breathing of the scientists waiting above. The experiment was a total loss. The weapon had activated itself. 3 days before the massacre in the corridor, the containment unit arrived at Hawkins National Laboratory under the cover of a simulated power outage that blacked out 3 counties. The object inside was not from the upside down. It had not crawled through a tear in the fabric of reality, but had fallen from the stars, burning a jagged line through the atmosphere before impacting the localized magnetic anomaly of the town. Dr. Brenner did not view it as a visitor. He viewed it as a resource. The recovery team found a viscous, amorphous solid trapped inside a cracked geode of heat-fused silicate. It was black, darker than the void of space, and it reacted to sound. Back in the sublevels, the scientists isolated the sample in a pressurized glass cube. They blasted it with sonics. They burned it with lasers. They starved it. The organism remained dormant, a hardened sludge that refused to play by biological rules. It was dying. It needed a host to survive the oxygen-rich atmosphere of Earth. Brenner, obsessed with the psychic potential of Subject 11, made a calculated error. He theorized that the organism was a biological amplifier. He believed that if he could synthesize its regenerative properties, he could fix the toll that remote viewing took on Eleven's body. He did not introduce them directly. He simply placed the sample in the observation room adjacent to the sensory deprivation tank. He wanted to see if the organism reacted to high-level psionic waves. 11 floated in the salt water, the darkness of her mind expanding into the void. She was looking for the Russian spy, but her mind brushed against something else. She felt a cold, ancient hunger. It was not the Demogorgon. It was closer. It was right next door. The moment her psychic signature peaked, the sample in the glass case woke up. It sensed the immense bioelectric output of the child's brain. It was a beacon in a silent world. The creature threw itself against the reinforced glass. To the scientists, it looked like an explosion of black ink. The glass cracked, not from impact, but from a resonant frequency the creature emitted, a counter-vibration to the room's hum. The alarm klaxons blared. 11 screamed in the tank, thrashing as the water churned. The creature slithered through the ventilation ducts, bypassing the sealed doors. It moved with desperate speed. It poured itself into the tank room, finding the girl gasping for air as the orderlies tried to pull her out. It did not attack. It bonded. The black liquid hit her wet skin and sank in instantly. The pain was absolute. It felt like freezing water and boiling oil, simultaneously entering her bloodstream. Her seizure threw the orderlies across the room. Brenner watched from the upper deck, fascinated and horrified, as the girl stood up. She was no longer just 11. She was the host. The escape that followed was a blur of violence and confusion. The creature, which called itself Venom in the chaotic static of 11's thoughts, was disoriented. It was acting on instinct. It protected the host. It neutralized threats. The breakout left 23 military personnel dead and the infrastructure of the East Wing in ruins. 11 ran until her bare feet bled, and then the suit formed soles to protect her. She ran until she reached the perimeter fence. The chain-link barrier, usually an insurmountable obstacle for a child, was torn open like wet paper. She stumbled into the woods of Mirkwood, the rain washing away the blood that wasn't hers. The suit receded, dissolving back into her pores, leaving her shivering in a hospital gown that was too thin for the November chill. The voice in her head was loud. It sounded like gravel grinding together. It demanded food. It demanded safety. It showed her images of eating the squirrels that chattered in the trees. 11 clutched her head, screaming for the voice to stop. But it wasn't a sound she could block out. It was inside the auditory processing center of her brain. Hunger drove them to the edge of town. The symbiote was starving. It had expended a massive amount of energy escaping the lab and keeping the host's body from collapsing under the strain of the bond. It needed phenethylamine. It needed chocolate or brain tissue. 11 didn't know the chemistry. She only knew she felt a hollowness in her stomach that hurt worse than the needles. She found Benny's burgers. The lights were warm. The smell of grease and meat drifted out into the rain. She tried to steal food from the back, her movements jagged and uncoordinated. Benny Hammond caught her. He was a big man, kind but imposing. When he grabbed her arm to stop her from running, the symbiote surged. Black tendrils erupted from 11's shoulder, lashing out to strike. 11 mentally screamed, a psychic command of no that hit the symbiote like a physical blow. The tendrils retracted instantly. Benny stumbled back, thinking he had seen a shadow or a trick of the light. He saw a scared, shaved-headed child. He didn't see the monster. He saw a victim. Benny fed her. He gave her a burger and fries. The symbiote complained. The meat was dead. It wanted fresh prey. But the calories helped. The warmth helped. 11 ate ravenously, the symbiote metabolizing the food as fast as she could swallow it. Benny tried to talk to her. He asked her name. She pointed to the tattoo on her arm. 011. The symbiote analyzed the man's pheromones. He was not a threat. He was producing dopamine and oxytocin. Kindness. The alien entity was confused. On its homeworld, kindness was a weakness. Here, it seemed to be a survival strategy. Benny made the call to social services, thinking he was doing the right thing. He smiled at her, offering her ice cream. The symbiote liked the chocolate. It purred in the back of her mind, a low vibration that made 11's teeth ache. For an hour, they were safe. The symbiote rested, repairing the micro tears in 11's muscles. It learned from her memories. It saw the lab. It saw Papa. It saw the bad room. It understood that Papa was the enemy. Then the woman arrived. Connie Fraser. She posed as a social worker. The symbiote smelled the gun oil and the cold sweat of anticipation before she even walked through the door. It screamed a warning, but 11 was too slow to understand. Benny opened the door. He turned to smile at 11. Fraser raised a silenced pistol and shot him in the head. The sound was a quiet puff of air, but the result was final. Benny fell. The kindness was gone. The source of the burgers and chocolate was dead. 11 stared at Benny's body. The shock froze her. But Venom did not freeze. Venom felt the host's spike of cortisol and grief. The grief was delicious, but the threat was immediate. Fraser stepped over the body, aiming the gun at the child. She smiled, a cold, professional expression. She thought she was recovering a scared lab rat. She was wrong. The transformation was not gradual this time. It was an explosion. The black mass erupted from 11's skin, expanding outward with enough force to flip the heavy diner table. Fraser fired 2 shots. The bullets hit the mass and vanished. A clawed hand, massive and slick, swatted the gun away, crushing the weapon into scrap metal. Fraser's eyes went wide. She had read the files on the telekinetic subject. This was not in the files. The creature that towered over her was 7 feet of muscle and teeth. It roared, a sound that shattered the diner's windows. Fraser reached for a backup weapon, but the creature was faster. It lunged. There was no telekinetic hold, no nosebleed, just the brutal, wet sound of predation. The symbiote bit down. It was messy. It was necessary. The other agents outside heard the roar and the crash. They opened fire on the building. 11 was a passenger in her own body. She watched through the white patches of the suit's eyes as the agents died. She wanted to look away, but the symbiote wouldn't let her. It wanted her to see. It wanted her to understand that this was how they survived. They broke through the back wall of the diner, taking a chunk of the brickwork with them. The agents shouted orders, their flashlights cutting through the rain. The creature moved into the darkness, blending perfectly with the shadows. It scaled the side of the diner to the roof, leaping over the heads of the tactical team. It didn't kill them all. It left enough alive to spread the fear. Fear was a weapon. Fear slowed the enemy down. They landed in the woods behind the diner, the impact cracking a fallen log. The suit melted away again. 11 fell to her knees in the mud, retching. She looked at her hands. There was no blood on them, but she could taste the iron in her mouth. She could taste what the symbiote had done. Bad, she whispered, her voice trembling. Bad. Safe, the voice corrected her. It was deeper now, satisfied. We are safe. 11 stumbled deeper into the woods. She couldn't go back to the lab. She couldn't go back to the diner. She was a monster. The symbiote tried to comfort her, showing her images of power, of being untouchable. It didn't understand why she was crying. It had saved them. It had gathered nutrients. The connection between them was straining. 11's moral compass, simple but rigid, was at war with the symbiote's amoral survival instinct. She was the brake. It was the engine. She walked for hours, the rain soaking her gown. The cold was setting in again. The symbiote burned calories to keep her body temperature stable, but it was running low on fuel again. The fight had been expensive. Meanwhile, in the basement of the Wheeler house, the game of Dungeons & Dragons had ended in a dispute. Will Byers had admitted defeat to the Demogorgon, but the real horror was waiting in the rain. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin rode their bikes into the storm, searching for their missing friend. They had flashlights and walkie-talkies, armed only with childhood optimism. They rode through Mirkwood, calling out Will's name. The rain muffled their voices. The static on the radios hissed. Mike led the way, his beam cutting through the wet trees. He stopped when he heard the rustling. It wasn't the sound of a boy. It was the sound of something heavy dragging itself through the brush. "Did you hear that?" Mike whispered. "It's probably just a deer," Dustin said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Or a bear," Lucas added, raising his slingshot. The bushes parted. 11 stepped out. She looked wrecked. Her hospital gown was stained with mud and grease. Her head was shaved. She was shivering violently. She looked at the 3 boys, her eyes wide and terrified. She didn't see 3 kids. She saw potential threats. The symbiote surged under her skin, black veins pulsing along her neck. It hissed in her mind. Identify. Threat assessment. Mike lowered his flashlight, shining it on her face. Profound silence settled over the group. "Is that a kid?" Dustin asked. "She has no hair," Lucas noted. 11 took a step back. The symbiote urged her to intimidate them, to show the teeth. But 11 saw the boys' faces. They looked worried. They weren't wearing uniforms. They didn't have guns. "No," she whispered to the air. Mike stepped forward, taking off his raincoat. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." The symbiote paused. It tasted the air. No aggression. High levels of curiosity and concern. "Weak," the voice sneered. "Small." "Friends?" 11 thought, the word rising from a buried memory. Mike draped the jacket over her shoulders. The warmth was immediate. 11 touched the fabric. It smelled like laundry detergent and basement mold. It smelled real. "Where is Will?" Mike asked. 11 stared at him. She didn't know who Will was, but she knew that if she stayed out here, the bad men would find her. The bad men with the guns. And if they found her, the monster would come out again. She didn't want the monster to come out. She nodded at Mike, a silent plea for help. "We have to take her back," Mike said. "Are you crazy?" Lucas hissed. "We don't know who she is." "She's freezing," Mike argued. "We can't just leave her." "She's weird," Dustin said, looking at the black veins fading from her neck. "Did you see her skin? It was moving." "It's just the shadows," Mike insisted. He looked at 11. "Come on, I have a basement. It's safe." Safe. The word triggered a response in both 11 and Venom. Safe was the goal. Safe was the priority. 11 climbed onto the back of Mike's bike. She wrapped her arms around his waist. The symbiote remained dormant, lurking beneath the surface, analyzing the structural integrity of the bicycle and the caloric density of the boy pedaling it. It decided to wait. Back at the lab, Dr. Brenner stood over the ruins of the East Wing. The containment team was sweeping up the shell casings. The footage from the security cameras had been reviewed. Brenner watched the loop of the black creature tearing the elevator doors apart. He rewound the tape. He played it frame by frame. He saw the moment the bullets hit. He saw the absorption. He saw the integration. "It didn't just bond," a technician said, his voice shaking. "It adapted. It's using her psychokinesis to manipulate its own biomass. It's making her stronger." Brenner stared at the screen. "No," he said quietly. "She's making it stronger. The organism is a force multiplier. But without direction, it's just an animal. With her," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The implications were catastrophic. A telekinetic girl was dangerous. A telekinetic girl wearing an indestructible, shape-shifting biological tank was an extinction-level event if they couldn't control it. "Find her," Brenner ordered. "Do not engage with small arms. Use fire. Use sonics. And if you can't contain her, kill the host." He turned away. He knew it wouldn't be that easy. The symbiote would not let the host die. It had tasted freedom. It had tasted power. And now it was out in the world, hiding in the suburbs, waiting for the next trigger to unleash the nightmare. The boys smuggled 11 into the Wheeler basement. It was a fortress of blankets and pillow forts. Mike gave her dry clothes, a pair of sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt. 11 sat on the couch, shivering as the adrenaline faded. The symbiote was quiet, digesting the meal from the diner. It was satisfied for now. Mike offered her a leftover slice of pepperoni pizza. 11 looked at it. "Eat," Venom commanded. "Protein." She took a bite. It was cold, but it was food. "I'm Mike," he said, pointing to himself. "Mike." 11, she said, pointing to the tattoo. 11, Mike frowned. "Is that your name?" She nodded. "Okay, well, that's a number. We can call you L, short for 11. L." She liked it. It sounded like a name, not a label. Lucas and Dustin were pacing. "We should tell my mom," Lucas said. "No," Mike snapped. "If we tell the parents, they'll call the cops. If the cops come, they'll take her away. And look at her. Someone hurt her. Bad. Maybe she's escaped from an asylum," Dustin suggested. "Like Michael Myers." "She's not a psycho," Mike said. He looked at Elle. "You're not a psycho, right?" Elle stared at him. The symbiote rumbled. "They are loud." Mike set up the walkie-talkie. "We need to find Will." "Elle, do you know where Will is?" He showed her a picture of Will. Elle looked at the photo. She remembered the void. She remembered the dark place. She remembered the cold. But the memory was fuzzy, clouded by the symbiote's loud presence. She closed her eyes, trying to reach out. Usually, she needed the static, the sensory deprivation. But now, the symbiote acted as a conduit. It amplified her reach. She felt the black tendrils of her mind stretch out, not into the physical world, but into the ethereal plane. She saw a shadow, a cold, dark version of the house. She opened her eyes. A drop of blood trickled from her nose. A tiny tendril of black slime wiped it away before the boys could see it. "Will," she whispered. She flipped the Dungeons & Dragons board over to the black side. She grabbed the wizard figure. She slammed it down. "Hiding," she said. "Hiding where?" Mike asked. "In the dark," Elle said. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie crackled. It wasn't static. It was a sound, a low, wet breathing, and then a screech, the same screech the creature in the lab had made. The boys jumped. "What was that?" Lucas yelled. "That's not Will," Mike said, pale. Elle stared at the radio. She knew what it was. It was the Demogorgon. The symbiote recognized the frequency. It was a rival predator, a competitor. The symbiote's aggression spiked. It didn't fear the Demogorgon. It wanted to fight it. It wanted to claim territory. Elle clamped her hand over her ear. The noise was too loud. The symbiote was roaring in her mind, a challenge to the thing on the radio. "Kill it," Venom hissed. "Hunt." "No," Elle whimpered. "Elle." Mike touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark, the pupils blown wide. For a second, her voice layered, a double resonance of girl and monster. "Monster," she said. "Is the monster? Is it the one who took Will?" Mike asked. Elle nodded. "And is it the one hurting you?" Elle paused. She touched her chest, where the symbiote lived under her skin. She touched her head. "No," she said softly. "I am the monster." The boys exchanged glances. They thought she meant she was bad. They didn't know she was being literal. They didn't know that the shadow on the wall behind her was moving independently of the light source, shaping itself into a silhouette of teeth and tongue, smiling at them while the girl wept. The strategic condition had changed. The boys were looking for a lost friend. They had found a weapon of mass destruction. The lab was looking for their asset. The Demogorgon was hunting in the Upside Down. And in the middle of it all, a symbiotic bond was hardening. Elle was no longer just a telekinetic. She was the pilot of a biological war machine. And the machine was getting hungry again. The pizza wasn't enough. The symbiote needed more. It needed the hunt. As the boys argued about what to do next, Elle stared at the window. She could feel the agents out there. She could feel the flashlight beam sweeping the woods. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. And the next time the bad men came, she wouldn't just run. The voice in her head promised her that. Next time, they would feast. The following morning brought a silence that was heavy and suffocating. In the Wheeler basement, the air smelled of stale pizza and something else, something metallic and sharp like ozone. 11 sat inside the pillow fort, her knees pulled to her chest. She was sweating, but her skin was cold to the touch. The symbiote was restless. It moved beneath her skin like a submerged eel, rippling across her arms and neck. It was hungry. The pepperoni pizza had been burned through hours ago, converted into raw kinetic potential that the organism was now hoarding. It wanted density. It wanted phenethylamine. It wanted living tissue. 11 clamped her hands over her stomach, trying to quiet the growling that wasn't coming from her digestive tract, but from the alien mass fused to her nervous system. Mike brought her breakfast on a tray before school. Eggos. He had toasted them. He thought she would like them because they were sweet. 11 looked at the waffles. The symbiote analyzed the nutritional content in a millisecond. Carbohydrates, sugar, insufficient. It hissed in the back of her mind, a sound like steam escaping a pipe. Eat, it commanded. Biomass required. 11 picked up a waffle with a trembling hand. She took a bite. It tasted like cardboard. The symbiote sullenly accepted the calories, stripping the sugar out instantly to fuel the brain. But it remained agitated. "You have to stay here," Mike whispered, checking the stairs to make sure his mom wasn't coming down. "Stay in the fort. Don't make any noise. I'll be back at 3:15. 11 nodded. She didn't want him to leave. When he was near, the symbiote was calmer. It liked his brain waves. They were steady, protective. But when he left, the hunger would get louder. Mike hesitated, then reached out and touched her arm. The black veins that had been pulsing there receded instantly, hiding from his touch. He didn't see them. He just felt how cold she was. "You're freezing," he said. "Keep the blankets on. Promise. Promise," 11 whispered. It was a new word. It meant something you couldn't break. Mike left. The basement door clicked shut. 11 was alone. Or she would have been alone, if not for the voice. The silence of the house amplified the alien thoughts. The symbiote began to catalogue the environment. It sensed the electromagnetic hum of the refrigerator upstairs. It sensed the heartbeat of the dog in the backyard. The dog, a potential source of protein. No, 11 thought hard. No dog. Weak, the symbiote sneered. Survival is not pretty. The hunger pains hit her like a cramp. She curled up, gasping. The symbiote was beginning to feed on her. It was subtle at first. It broke down the lactic acid in her muscles. Then it started targeting her fat reserves. She felt lighter, hollowed out. She needed to find Will. If she found Will, maybe the boys would help her. Maybe the bad men would stop hunting. The logic was childish, but it was all she had. She crawled out of the fort. She saw the Supercom walkie-talkie on the table. She picked it up. The static hissed. It was the same sound as the ocean in her mind. She closed her eyes. "Find him," the symbiote whispered. This time, she didn't just listen. The symbiote pushed. It flooded her auditory cortex with enhanced sensitivity. The static cleared. She could hear the radio waves bouncing through the atmosphere. She heard a trucker in Chicago. She heard a weather report from Hawkins. And then she heard the breathing. It was deep and wet. It was the sound of the upside down. "Will," she whispered. "L." The voice was faint, distorted by distance and dimension. "Is that you? It's dark. It's so dark." The connection snapped. A surge of feedback shrieked through the walkie-talkie. The speaker blew out with a pop and a puff of smoke. 11 dropped the radio. It was hot. The symbiote roared in triumph. It had tasted the quarry, but it had also acted as a beacon. Across town, at Hawkins Power and Light, the surveillance van's instruments went into the red. The audio spike was massive. It wasn't just a radio transmission. It was a psychic scream that bled into the RF spectrum. "We have a lock," the technician shouted, ripping his headphones off. "High amplitude signal. It's the girl." Dr. Brenner looked at the map. The triangulation lines crossed in a residential neighborhood. Maple Street. "Mobilize," Brenner said, "and bring the containment unit, the heavy one." He didn't mean the van. He meant the flamethrowers. By the time the boys came back from school, the situation had deteriorated. They found 11 on the floor of the basement, unconscious. She was pale, her lips blue. The walkie-talkie was a melted ruin next to her. "L." Mike dropped his backpack and ran to her. Dustin checked her pulse. "It's really slow," he said, panicking. Like reptile slow. Lucas looked at the radio. She fried it. She must have tried to use her powers. 11's eyes fluttered open. The whites were bloodshot. Will, she croaked. Home. What? Mike asked. Will. Home. Hiding. She heard him, Lucas asked, skeptical. She channeled him, Dustin realized. Like Professor X. But she needs a bigger radio. That little thing couldn't handle the juice. We need the Heath kit, Mike said. At school. Now. It's night, Lucas argued. The school is locked. Mr. Clark gave us the keys for the AV club, Mike said. We can sneak in. If she knows where Will is, we have to try. They looked at 11. She tried to stand up, but her legs buckled. The symbiote tightened its hold on her spine, forcing her upright like a marionette. It knew they were going to a place with technology. Technology meant power. Power meant safety. I can walk, 11 said. Her voice was layered again, a subtle double tone that made the hair on Dustin's arm stand up. She's not looking good, Mike, Dustin whispered. She looks like she's dying. She's just hungry, Mike said, trying to convince himself. We'll get her some food on the way. They rode to the middle school under the cover of darkness. The moon was obscured by heavy clouds. 11 sat on the back of Mike's bike, her grip crushing the fabric of his jacket. The symbiote was scanning the perimeter. It smelled diesel exhaust. It smelled gun oil. The hunters were close. It urged 11 to run into the woods, but she refused. She was loyal to the pack now. The boys were the pack. They sneaked into the school through the side door near the cafeteria. The hallways were dark and empty, shadows stretching long across the lockers. To the boys, it was an adventure. To 11 and Venom, it was a tactical kill box, long sight lines, limited exits, hard surfaces. They reached the AV room. The Heathkit ham radio sat on the desk like a shrine. Okay, Elle, Mike said, sitting her down. Can you find him again? 11 nodded. She didn't need the sensory deprivation tank this time. The symbiote was the tank. It wrapped around her senses, cutting off the ambient noise of the room, the hum of the lights, the breathing of the boys. It plunged her into the void. She reached out. The radio lights flickered. The speaker hummed. The channel opened. Mom. Will's voice came through, clear and terrified. Mom, are you there? Will, Mike shouted at the radio. It's us. It's Mike. The boys crowded around, but 11 wasn't listening to Will. She was listening to something else. Behind Will's voice, there was a chittering sound, a predatory clicking. The Demogorgon. The symbiote reacted violently. It hated that sound. It recognized a rival apex predator. Mine, Venom hissed in Elle's mind. Prey. The surge of aggression broke Elle's concentration. The radio sparked. A bolt of electricity arced from the dial to Elle's hand. She didn't flinch. The symbiote absorbed the voltage, feeding on the energy. Did you hear that? Lucas asked. He sounded like he was right there. We have to tell his mom, Mike said. We know he's alive. Suddenly, the school fire alarm blared. The sound was deafening. The boys covered their ears. Run, 11 said. Her head snapped up. What? Mike yelled over the alarm. Bad men, 11 said. Here. The exit doors at the end of the hallway burst open. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Men in grey suits and tactical vests poured in. They weren't carrying tranquilizer guns this time. They were carrying MP5 submachine guns. Freeze, one of them shouted. Go. Mike shoved Dustin and Lucas toward the gym. They ran. The boots of the soldiers thundered on the linoleum. Target acquired. A voice crackled over the radio. Permission to engage. Permission granted. Brenner's voice replied. Neutralize the host if necessary. Extract the sample. The soldiers opened fire. Bullets chewed up the lockers next to Dustin's head. Sparks and metal shards flew everywhere. "They're shooting at us," Dustin screamed. "They're actually shooting at us." They scrambled into the gym, slipping on the polished floor. Mike dragged 11. She was heavy, her feet dragging. The hunger had made her weak, but the adrenaline was waking the symbiote up. The soldiers breached the gym doors. There were 6 of them. They fanned out, weapons raised. "End of the line," the lead soldier said. Mike stood in front of 11. He held up his hands. "Stop. We're just kids." The soldier didn't lower his gun. "Step aside, kid." "No," Mike yelled. The soldier raised his boot and kicked Mike in the chest. Mike flew backward, skidding across the floor. He gasped. The wind knocked out of him. "Mike!" Lucas and Dustin screamed. 11 watched Mike fall. She saw the pain on his face. She saw the soldier aim the gun at her. The hesitation vanished. The moral compass shattered. The symbiote did not ask for permission. It did not wait for a psychic command. It took the wheel. "Hungry!" the voice roared. 11's body arched. The sound of tearing fabric filled the gym. The black substance exploded from her back, not as tendrils this time, but as a tidal wave. It engulfed her small form, expanding, hardening, growing. The boys watched in frozen horror as their friend disappeared. In her place stood a monstrosity. It was 8 feet tall. Its skin was like oil-slicked obsidian. White veins pulsed across its chest. A mouth ripped open, revealing a nightmare of serrated teeth and a long, prehensile tongue that tasted the air. The soldiers faltered. They had been briefed on a girl with mind powers. They had not been briefed on this. "What the hell is that?" one soldier screamed. Venom roared. The sound shattered the glass of the basketball backboards. The soldiers fired. The bullets hit the symbiote's chest and sank in, useless. Venom laughed, a gurgling, wet sound. "We are Venom," it bellowed. And then the slaughter began. Venom lunged across the gym floor, moving faster than a biological creature should be able to. It grabbed the lead soldier, the one who had kicked Mike, by the head. There was a sickening crunch. The soldier went limp. Venom threw the body across the gym like a rag doll. It slammed into the bleachers with enough force to splinter the wood. The other soldiers panicked. They sprayed bullets wildly. Venom ignored them. It swiped a massive claw, severing the barrels of 2 guns and the fingers holding them. The soldiers screamed. Mike, Lucas, and Dustin huddled together on the floor, their eyes wide, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. This wasn't L. This was a demon. Venom grabbed a soldier by the leg and whipped him into the ceiling girders. Bones snapped. The creature was brutal, efficient, and cruel. It didn't just kill. It dismantled. It bit through tactical vests. It tore through helmets. One soldier tried to run. Venom shot a web of black slime from its wrist. The webbing hit the soldier's back, sticking him to the gym doors. Venom pulled, dragging the screaming man back across the floor. "Please," the man begged. Venom leaned down, its massive jaws opening wide. "Eyes, lungs, pancreas," it hissed. "So many snacks, so little time." "Don't," Mike screamed. Venom paused. The massive head snapped toward Mike. The white patches narrowed. Inside the monster, 11 was screaming too. She didn't want Mike to see this. She didn't want to be the monster in front of him. The hesitation gave the last soldier an opening. He pulled a pin on a grenade and rolled it toward them. "Grenade!" Lucas yelled. Venom didn't flee. It didn't shield itself. It shielded the pack. The creature dove over the boys, covering them with its massive bulk. The grenade detonated. The blast was muffled by the symbiote's mass. The explosion ripped into the alien flesh, tearing chunks of biomass away, exposing the ribs of the girl underneath for a split second before the sludge knitted itself back together. Venom roared in pain and fury. It turned to the soldier who had thrown the grenade. It didn't toy with him. It simply extended a tendril like a spear and impaled him through the chest. Silence fell over the gym. The air was thick with smoke and the copper smell of blood. 6 men were dead. Broken bodies littered the court. The walls were splattered with black slime and red blood. Venom stood up panting. Steam rose from its body. It turned to the boys. The transformation receded. The monster melted away, revealing 11. She was covered in sweat and grime, her nose bleeding profusely. She looked at the boys. She looked at the carnage. She waited for them to say thank you. She waited for Mike to smile. But Mike didn't smile. He was trembling. He looked at the bodies, then at Elle. There was fear in his eyes. Pure, unadulterated fear. You, Lucas whispered. You ate them. 11 took a step forward. Mike flinched. The flinch hurt worse than the grenade. Elle stopped. She looked at her hands. They were trembling. Friends, she whispered. Mike swallowed hard. He couldn't speak. He couldn't reconcile the girl who liked Eggos with the thing that had just bitten a man's head. Sirens wailed in the distance. More bad men were coming. Police. Fire trucks. The explosion had been heard. We have to go, Dustin said, his voice cracking. We can't stay here. They stood up, shaky and terrified. The dynamic had broken. They weren't a party of adventurers anymore. They were hostages to a situation they couldn't control. 11 wiped the blood from her nose. She felt the symbiote purring in her mind. It was full. It was happy. It didn't understand why the boys were sad. It had won. Safe, Venom whispered to her. 11 looked at Mike's terrified face. Not safe, she thought back. Broken. They fled through the back exit, leaving the massacre behind. They ditched the bikes and ran into the woods, heading toward the junkyard. It was the only place Lucas could think of when no one would look. As they ran, the reality of the night settled in. The secrecy was over. The lab knew exactly what she was. The boys knew exactly what she was. In the command center, Dr. Brenner listened to the static from the dead squad's radio. He didn't look angry. He looked vindicated. It's confirmed, he said to the room. The bonding is absolute. The host is fully integrated. Sir, the general beside him said, his face pale. That thing just killed a Delta Force squad in 30 seconds. How do we contain it? Brenner turned to the screen. We don't contain it with force, he said. We starve it. We isolate it. And then we burn it out. He looked at the map of Hawkins. Lock down the town, he ordered. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. We hunt them down house by house and bring the flamethrowers. All of them. In the dark woods, 11 stopped. She leaned against a tree, retching. The symbiote had protected her from the physical damage of the grenade, but the psychic toll of the violence was heavy. She could still taste the soldier's fear. Mike stopped ahead. He looked back at her. He didn't offer his hand. Come on, he said quietly. The distance between them was only 10 feet, but it felt like miles. 11 walked alone, the monster under her skin, silent and watchful, waiting for the next threat to emerge from the dark. The first catastrophe had happened. The innocence was dead, and the night was far from over. The flight to the junkyard was a blur of exhausted sobbing and the crunch of gravel under sneaker soles. The old-school bus sat in the center of a labyrinth of rusted cars and scrap metal, a hollowed-out skeleton of safety that offered shelter from the wind, but not from the truth. The boys huddled on the cracked vinyl seats in the back. 11 sat at the front, near the driver's seat. She was separated from them not by distance, but by the memory of the sound wet bone makes when it snaps. The air inside the bus was freezing, yet 11 felt feverish. The symbiote was agitated, coiling and uncoiling around her internal organs, vibrating with a low-frequency hum that made her vision blur. It was confused. It had eliminated the threat. It had protected the pack. Why was the pack vibrating with cortisol? Why was the leader, Mike, looking at them with the same expression he wore when looking at the Demogorgon? The disconnect between human morality and alien survivalism was widening into a chasm. Lucas paced the narrow aisle, his flashlight beam jittering against the rusted roof. He was the first to break the silence, and when he did, it wasn't with a question, but with an accusation. He pointed the light at 11. The beam hit her face, causing her to squint. The shadow of the symbiote flickered behind her eyes, a second pupil contracting in the light. "She's dangerous," Lucas said, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and adrenaline. "Did you see that? That wasn't magic, Mike. That wasn't Yoda. She ate that guy. She literally ate him." Mike sat with his head in his hands. He was trying to process the image of the soldier's helmet crumpling like foil. He wanted to defend her. He wanted to say she had no choice, but the metallic taste of blood was still in the air. "She saved us," Mike said, but the conviction was gone from his voice. "They were going to kill us, Lucas. So she turns into a demon and murders them," Lucas shouted, kicking a seat. "What happens when she gets hungry again, huh? What happens when she runs out of bad guys and looks at us?" 11 shrank back against the cold metal of the dashboard. The symbiote hissed in her mind. "Ungrateful," it growled. "Small. Prey logic. We should leave them. We should hunt." "No," 11 thought. The mental command weak and frayed. "Friends. Friends don't eat people," Lucas yelled, as if hearing the alien's thought. Dustin, who had been pacing in a tight circle, stopped. He looked at 11 with the analytical detachment of a scientist observing a supernova, terrified but unable to look away. He pulled a compass from his pocket. The needle wasn't pointing north. It was spinning wildly, tracking the massive electromagnetic field 11 was generating, even while resting. "It's not just her," Dustin said quietly. "It's a suit, like a biosuit." "What?" Mike looked up. "In the gym," Dustin said, talking fast to keep the panic at bay. "It covered her. It took the damage. The grenade. It didn't hurt her because it hit the shell. It's a symbiotic relationship." Lucas stared at him. "A what?" "Symbiosis. Two organisms living together. One provides the house, the other provides the weapons." He looked at 11. "Is it talking to you?" Dustin asked. "Right now?" 11 nodded slowly. "What is it saying?" Mike whispered. 11 looked at the boys. Her lip quivered. She couldn't tell them it was calling them snacks. She couldn't tell them it was analyzing Lucas's bone density. "It wants safety," she lied. "Liar!" Lucas screamed. He lunged forward. The sudden movement triggered a reflex. Black tendrils shot out of 11's shoulder before she could stop them. They were razor thin but moved with the speed of a whip crack. They stopped an inch from Lucas's throat, hovering there, vibrating with menace. Lucas froze. Mike jumped up. "Elle, stop!" Mike screamed. 11 grabbed her own wrist, her face contorted in effort. She wasn't doing it. Venom was doing it. The symbiote was reacting to the aggression. It didn't understand that Lucas was a friend. It only understood that he was shouting and advancing. "Down," 11 gritted out through clenched teeth. She mentally shoved the entity back. It was like wrestling a tiger. Slowly, reluctantly, the tendrils receded into her skin, leaving behind only the bruise-colored veins. Lucas scrambled backward, falling over his own feet. He scrambled to the emergency exit door at the back of the bus. "I'm done," he panted. "I'm done." "You're crazy if you stay with her. She's a monster." "Lucas, wait," Mike called out. Lucas kicked the door open and jumped out into the night. He grabbed his bike from the pile of junk and pedaled away, his headlight cutting a frantic path through the darkness. He didn't look back. The party was broken. The dynamic of trust that had held them together was shattered by the reality of lethal force. Across town, the escalation was moving from tactical to strategic. Dr. Brenner sat in the mobile command unit parked outside the middle school. The gym was a crime scene of unprecedented horror. The bodies had been removed, but the blood splatter told the story. Brenner wasn't looking at the blood. He was looking at the chemical analysis report of the black residue left on the floor. Amorphous silicate-based polymer. The technician read, his voice shaking. "It's not DNA-based, sir. It's mutable. It changes state from liquid to solid in microseconds based on adrenaline spikes." Brenner nodded. "It protects the host. It acts as an exoskeleton." He looked at the map of Hawkins. The town was small, but the woods were deep. "The creature reacts to sound," Brenner said. "We saw that in the lab. But what about heat?" The technician checked the report. "We recovered a piece of the biomass that was blown off by the grenade. We tested it. It's highly susceptible to thermal destabilization." "Fire, sir. It hates fire. It can't maintain cohesion above 400 degrees. Brenner smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. "The girl has telekinesis. She can stop bullets. She can stop men. But she cannot stop fire. Fire consumes oxygen. She needs to breathe." He picked up the radio. "All units, switch to incendiary rounds. Deploy the flamethrower teams. And call the power company. I want a grid search of every high-voltage transformer in the county. That thing is a biological battery. It will need to recharge." He paused. "And find the boy. The one who ran away. If we can't find the girl, we find her pets." In the junkyard, time dragged. 11 drifted in and out of consciousness. The hunger was returning, sharper this time. The symbiote had expended massive energy repairing the grenade damage and holding back its aggression. It began to feed on 11's memories to sustain itself, burning through the neural pathways of her past. She twitched in her sleep, dreaming of the rainbow room, but the rainbow was black, and the other children had no faces. Mike sat next to her, watching her breathe. He was terrified, but his loyalty was a stubborn, irrational force. Dustin was on the roof of the bus, with his binoculars, keeping watch. "Mike," 11 whispered. "Yeah, I'm here." "Bad," she said. "I am bad." "No," Mike said, his voice cracking. "You're not. It's the thing, the symbiote. It's making you do it." "We are one," she said. That was the horror of it. There was no clear line where the girl ended and the monster began. They shared a brainstem. They shared a heart. Suddenly, Dustin scrambled down through the roof hatch. "Guys," he hissed, "we have a problem." "Police?" Mike asked. "Worse. The power lines. Look." He pointed out the window. In the distance, the high-tension power lines that cut through the woods were sparking. Birds were flying away from the trees in the middle of the night. "Something is walking along the lines," Dustin said. "Something big." "The Demogorgon?" Mike asked. "No," 11 said. She sat up, her eyes snapping open. Not the monster. The men. She could feel them. A hive mind of a different sort. Radio waves, tactical coordination. The symbiote sensed the specific chemical signature of the accelerant they were carrying. "Napalm." "They are coming," Venom whispered. "Fire." The fear that spiked in the alien was absolute. It wasn't the fear of death. It was the fear of unmaking. Fire didn't just kill it. It severed the bond. It turned the liquid solid and brittle. "We must leave," the symbiote commanded, forcing 11 to her feet. Too late. A spotlight washed over the bus, blindingly bright. The junkyard, usually a place of shadows, was instantly illuminated in a harsh white light. The hum of heavy engines vibrated the ground. "This is the US government," a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Step out of the vehicle." Mike grabbed 11's hand. "Run." They kicked open the back door, the same one Lucas had used. They jumped into the dirt, crouching behind a stack of crushed cars. The night erupted. They didn't wait for a surrender. Brenner wasn't taking chances this time. A stream of liquid fire arced over the bus, hitting the dry grass and oil-soaked junk. The heat was instantaneous and blistering. The world turned orange. 11 screamed. It wasn't just fear. The symbiote was screaming in her head, a chaotic, deafening shriek of pain. The heat disrupted its connection to her nervous system. The black veins on her skin boiled and retracted, hiding deep inside her muscle tissue. She fell to her knees, clutching her head. "Elle." Mike tried to pull her up. "Get up. We have to move." "I can't," she gasped. The symbiote was paralyzed. Without the suit, she was just a girl, a tired, starving girl. The flamethrower teams advanced. They were wearing hazmat suits, looking like silver astronauts in the inferno. They sprayed the piles of junk, creating a wall of fire. They were hurting them. Dustin grabbed a piece of pipe. "Go right, through the tires." They scrambled through the maze of rubber and steel. The smoke was thick, acrid, and black. It choked them, making their eyes water. The heat was intensifying. They reached a dead end. A wall of stacked sedans blocked their path. Behind them, the fire was closing in. 2 agents rounded the corner, their flamethrowers primed. "There they are," one shouted. He pulled the trigger. The stream of fire shot toward them. Mike stood in front of 11, shielding her with his small body. It was a useless, heroic gesture, but the fire never hit them. At the last second, survival instinct overrode the pain. The symbiote realized that hiding would mean death. It had to fight, even if it hurt. The black mass exploded from 11's back, not as a suit, but as a shield. It formed a wall of hardened biomass in front of Mike. The fire hit the black wall. The symbiote shrieked, the sound sounding like tearing metal. The fire burned it, blistering the alien flesh. But it held. Venom pushed. With a roar of exertion, the black shield expanded, shoving the fire back toward the agents. The flames washed over the soldiers. They screamed as their tanks ruptured. The explosion rocked the junkyard. A shockwave of heat and shrapnel knocked the boys flat. 11 stood in the center of the inferno. She was fully transformed now, but the suit looked different. It was jagged, unstable. The surface was boiling, bubbling from the heat. The white eyes were wide and frantic. "Fire!" Venom roared. "Bad!" The creature turned. It saw the stack of cars blocking their escape. It didn't climb them. It smashed through them. With a massive sweep of its claws, Venom tore a sedan in half, creating a hole in the wall. "Go!" the monster bellowed at the boys. Mike and Dustin scrambled through the hole. Venom followed, the fire licking at its heels. They burst out into the woods behind the junkyard. The air was cool here. The symbiote immediately dissolved, retreating from the surface to heal its burns. 11 collapsed into the leaves, coughing up black bile. Mike fell beside her. Elle, are you okay?" She looked up at him. Her face was grey. Her eyes were sunken. The connection was damaging her. The healing was costing too much. "We escaped," Dustin wheezed, leaning against a tree. "No," 11 whispered. She looked into the darkness of the woods. She could feel the vibrations in the ground. The explosion had attracted attention, not just the soldiers. The trees were moving, not from wind, from the upside down. The barrier between worlds was thinning. The blood spilled in the gym, the massive psychic energy used in the junkyard. It was tearing the curtain. 11 closed her eyes. She saw him, the Demogorgon. It was close, but she saw something else too. Behind the Demogorgon, there was a shadow, a giant spider-like shape looming over the alternate dimension. A hive mind. Venom saw it too. The symbiote froze. It recognized the structure of the mind. It wasn't the Clintar hive mind. It was something colder, something that didn't bond. It enslaved. Enemy, Venom hissed. Ancient enemy. The strategic reality shifted again. They weren't just running from the government. They were running from an invasion. 11 stood up, using a tree for support. She looked at Mike. He was covered in soot, his jacket torn, his face bleeding from a cut. She looked at Dustin. He was shaking, clutching his compass. She realized the truth. Lucas was right. As long as she was with them, the fire would follow. The soldiers would follow. And the monsters would follow. She was the target. She was the beacon. She looked at Mike. Go, she said. What? Mike shook his head. No, we're sticking together. No, 11 said. Not safe. She pointed at herself. I am the danger. Elle, don't say that, Mike pleaded. We can hide. We can go to my house. The symbiote surged, covering half of her face. The duality was visible. One eye human and tearful, the other a jagged white patch of alien resolve. We must hunt alone. The venom half distorted her voice. The pack slows us down. It wasn't true. Venom wanted the pack. The pack was useful. But 11 was driving now. She was using the symbiote's intimidation to push them away, to save them. She raised her hand. A pulse of telekinetic energy hit Mike and Dustin, not enough to hurt, but enough to shove them backward 10 feet. Go home, 11 cried. She turned and ran. Elle, Mike screamed, scrambling up. Come back. But she was gone. The symbiote enhanced her speed. She moved through the underbrush like a shadow, faster than any boy could follow. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until she couldn't hear Mike screaming her name anymore. She was alone in the deep woods of Mirkwood. Cold, hungry, hunted. The symbiote rippled over her shoulders, forming a thermal blanket against the night air. Why? The voice asked in her head. They were resources. They were friends, 11 thought back. Friends don't get eaten. The symbiote fell silent. It didn't understand the logic, but it respected the conviction. Suddenly, the woods went silent. The crickets stopped chirping. The wind died down. A drop of slime fell from the tree branch above her. 11 looked up. The Demogorgon was clinging to the trunk, its petal face closed. It dropped down, landing silently in the moss. It stood 7 feet tall, a faceless nightmare. It didn't roar. It sniffed the air. It smelled the blood from the junkyard. It smelled the psychic power. Venom reacted instantly. The black suit enveloped 11, forming the armor. The white eyes narrowed. The mouth opened, dripping grey saliva. The Demogorgon opened its face, revealing the rows of teeth. It shrieked. Venom roared back. This was not a fight between a girl and a monster. This was a turf war between two apex predators. The Demogorgon lunged. Venom met it mid-air. The impact shook the trees. The chain reaction had begun. The stealth phase was over. The war for Hawkins had started in the dark, with two monsters tearing at each other in the mud, while the government burned the edges of the map, and the gate in the lab began to widen, pulsing in time with the violence. 11 was no longer the prey. She was the weapon, and the weapon was off the leash. The mud of Mirkwood churned under the weight of two titans colliding. The impact was not like a car crash. It was wet and heavy, the sound of meat slapping against meat with enough force to liquefy organs. Venom had the advantage of mass. The symbiote weighed nearly a ton when fully hardened, anchoring 11's small frame to the earth like a root system of iron. The Demogorgon was taller, lanky, and corded with muscle. Built for ambush and speed, it screamed, a sound of tearing metal, and raked its claws across Venom's chest. The black biomass parted like water, absorbing the slash before instantly knitting back together. Venom did not scream. Venom laughed. It was a low, gurgling sound that vibrated through the trees. To the alien entity, this was play. This was what it was born to do. It grabbed the Demogorgon's wrists, the white veins on its arms bulging as it applied crushing pressure. The Demogorgon shrieked again, this time in pain, as its radius and ulna snapped. Venom headbutted the creature, driving the hard ridge of its alien skull into the petal face of the monster from the upside down. Inside the suit, 11 was floating in a sensory void. She was not controlling the fight. She couldn't. The speed was too fast for her human neurons to track. She was the battery, the nuclear core that kept the engine running. But she was watching. She felt the symbiote's glee, and it terrified her. It enjoyed the breaking of bones. It enjoyed the dominance. But beneath the bloodlust, she felt its analysis. Venom was learning. It realized the enemy was cold. It realized the enemy had no eyes. It realized the enemy was rapidly regenerating, the broken bones clicking back into place within seconds. This was not a normal prey animal. This was a biological drone. The Demogorgon realized it was outmatched in a straight brawl. It did what predators do when they meet a bigger predator. It fled. It didn't run into the woods. It backed up against the massive oak tree, the one with the rot at its base. The bark split open, oozing a thick, viscous slime. The membrane between worlds stretched and tore. The monster stepped backward into the gelatinous portal, fading into the dark reflection of the world. Let it go, Venom hissed in her mind. We won. Territory secured. No, 11 thought. Her mental voice was jagged with exhaustion, but steel hard in resolve. Will. The name was a hook. It snagged the symbiote's attention. The boy, the mission, the pack. He is in there, Venom asked, pausing as the portal began to close. Yes, the choice was made in a heartbeat, a microsecond of decision that would alter the trajectory of 2 dimensions. If they had stayed, they would have been safe in the woods until the soldiers came. But 11 didn't want safety. She wanted her friend. She projected an image of Will, alone and cold, into the symbiote's mind. She projected the feeling of the void. Venom grumbled. It hated the cold, but it obeyed the alpha drive. The black mass lunged forward. Just as the tree began to seal, Venom thrust a massive hand into the slime, ripping the wound in reality back open. We dive, the monster roared. They threw themselves into the rot. The world flipped. The gravity shifted. The air pressure dropped instantly. They landed on the forest floor, but it wasn't the forest anymore. The trees were covered in a thick, grey, web-like growth. The air was filled with floating spores that drifted like ash from a nuclear winter. It was dark, lit only by a sickly blue ambient light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. The cold was absolute. It bit through the symbiote's layers. Venom reacted instantly. The suit tightened, becoming a fully sealed environmental hazard skin. It covered 11's mouth and nose, filtering the air. Toxic, Venom analyzed. The air is poison. Do not breathe, little host. We will filter. 11 looked around through the white eye patches. The woods were dead. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant, wet squelching of the landscape settling. Will, she projected. Silence. Venom sniffed the air. The tongue lashed out, tasting the spores. Death, Venom whispered. Old death. And a hive. The symbiote felt it before 11 did. A low thrumming in the atmosphere. It wasn't sound. It was a psychic pressure. Millions of organisms connected by a single frequency. To Venom, who came from a hive mind of its own, the Clintar. This felt familiar, but wrong. The Clintar hive was chaotic, noisy, a storm of voices. This hive was cold, rigid, tyrannical. It was a slave frequency. We are loud here, Venom warned. We must be quiet. They moved through the woods. Venom did not run. It prowled, shifting its mass to mimic the grey tones of the environment. Camouflage. They were hunting in a graveyard. Back in the right side up, the woods were quiet again. Mike and Dustin emerged from the brush, coughing from the smoke of the junkyard. They found the spot where the Titans had clashed. The mud was churned up for a 30-foot radius. Trees were snapped in half. There was black slime and green slime mixed in the dirt. She's gone, Mike whispered. He shone his flashlight on the hollow tree. The slime residue was fading, drying up into a flaky crust. She went into the upside down, Dustin said, his voice trembling. She chased it. Why would she do that? Mike asked, tears streaming down his soot-stained face. Why didn't she come back to us? Because she thinks she's a monster, Dustin said. And maybe she thinks that's where she belongs. The sound of snapping twigs made them spin around. Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan Byers stepped into the clearing. They were armed. Nancy with a baseball bat, Jonathan with a camera. They looked at the two terrified boys, then at the devastation in the clearing. Mike? Nancy dropped the bat. Oh God, Mike. She ran to him, hugging him fiercely. Mike didn't hug back. He was staring at the tree. Where is she? Jonathan asked, looking at the destruction. Where is the girl? She's gone, Dustin said. She went to find Will. Jonathan looked at the tree. He saw the residue. He touched it. It was cold. If she's in there, he said grimly, she's trapped. The gate she made. It's closing. We have to get her out, Mike said. We can't, Nancy said, pulling back. We don't know how to open it. I know who does, Dustin said. He pulled the compass out. The needle was spinning, but it had a general drift. The main gate, Dustin said. At the lab. It's the only one that stays open. That place is a fortress, Jonathan argued. Yeah, Dustin said. But if Elle is in there and Will is in there, that's where they're going to come out. And when they do, Brenner is going to be waiting. Mike wiped his face. His expression hardened. The fear was still there, but the loyalty was stronger. Then we have to be there too. In the upside down, time moved differently. It felt stretched, viscous. Venom moved through the dark version of Hawkins. They passed the rotting carcass of the high school. They passed the decaying shell of the arcade. The hunger was returning. Venom needed fuel to maintain the thermal regulation in the freezing cold. Hungry, it complained. 11 saw a slug crawling on a dead log. Eat, she suggested. Venom scoffed. Insufficient calories. We need density. Suddenly, they heard it. A whimper. It came from the direction of the Byers' house, or what used to be the Byers' house. They moved faster, leaping over the fences covered in alien webbing. They reached the backyard. The fort, Castle Byers, was standing, draped in the fleshy vines that pumped like veins. Inside, Venom ripped the vines away from the entrance. The structure groaned. Inside, curled in a fetal ball, was Will Byers. He was pale, his skin translucent and grey. He was entangled in the webbing. A thick, snake-like tendril was snaking down his throat, pumping something into his stomach. 11 gasped. "Will!" She tried to reach for him, but Venom stopped her hand. "Wait," the symbiote commanded. "Look." Venom pointed a claw. The vines around Will were reacting to their presence. They were twitching. "He is plugged in," Venom analyzed. "If we pull him, the hive wakes up." "We have to," 11 insisted. "Save him." Venom hesitated. It was a tactical risk. Waking the hive meant swarms. It meant the Demogorgon returning with friends. But the host's cortisol levels were spiking. If she panicked, the bond would destabilize. "Fine," Venom growled. "We do surgery." Venom extended a single finger. The claw elongated into a scalpel-thin needle. It moved with impossible precision. It sliced the webbing holding Will's wrists. Will didn't wake up. Then, the hard part. The tube in his throat. Venom grabbed the tendril. It felt the pulse of the hive mind flowing through it. It felt the cold intelligence on the other end. "Hold him," Venom ordered 11. 11 used her telekinesis to hold Will's body steady. Venom yanked the tendril. Will gagged. The vine slid out, wet and hideous. It thrashed like a dying snake. Venom didn't throw it away. The hunger was too strong. The symbiote was starving, and this thing was pure biomass. It was rich in energy, dark energy, but energy. Before 11 could scream, Venom bit the head off the tendril. "No!" 11 shouted in the internal space. Too late. Venom swallowed. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. This was the small choice. The choice to feed on the local flora. The moment the alien flesh hit Venom's digestion, a shockwave ripped through their shared mind. It wasn't just food. It was data. It was a hardline connection to the shadow monster. Venom screamed. 11 screamed. They saw it. A towering storm of shadows in the distance. A spider shape made of smoke and hatred. It turned its massive head toward them. It saw them, not with eyes, but with consciousness. It saw the anomaly, a clintar, a rogue element, a cancer in its perfectly ordered system. "Intruder," the voice boomed in their heads. Venom fell to its knees, retching. The biomass was toxic. It fought back. The symbiote's black surface rippled, turning a sickly grey for a moment before forcing the color back. "Run," Venom roared. It grabbed Will's unconscious body, throwing him over its shoulder like a sack of flour. The peaceful silence of the Upside Down shattered. The ground began to rumble. From the woods, the Demogorgons answered the call. Not one, dozens. And the vines on the ground, on the trees, on the castle, came alive. They lashed out, trying to grab Venom's legs. Venom slashed through them, moving with desperate speed. "Where?" Venom demanded. "Where is the exit?" "The gate." 11 projected the map of the town. The lab. It was 3 miles away. 3 miles through a waking nightmare. They ran. Venom moved on all fours, using one arm to carry Will and the other 3 limbs to gallop. It was faster than a car, bounding over obstacles, smashing through fences. Behind them, the baying of the pack grew louder. The Demogorgons were hunting. 11 focused her mind. She looked behind them. "Stop them," she commanded. She didn't use her hands. She used the suit. Venom spun around, still running backward. It fired a barrage of black spikes from his chest. The spikes hit the leading Demogorgons. They didn't just pierce. They expanded on impact, turning into caltrops that shredded the monster's legs. Strategic adaptation, Venom noted, pleased despite the panic. But the sky was changing. The red storm was swirling directly above them. Lightning, red and silent, struck the ground, scorching the earth. The Mind Flayer was trying to pinpoint them. "We are being tracked," Venom hissed. "The food. It put a marker on us." "I can help," 11 thought. "How?" "I can close the door." "Not yet. We are still inside." They reached the perimeter of the lab. The fence was gone here, rotted away. The main building loomed, a dark monolith against the red sky. The gate was in the basement. Venom smashed through the front doors of the lab. The interior was a ruin. Vines covered the security desk. The elevator shaft was open. Venom didn't wait for the elevator. It jumped down the shaft, sliding down the cables, sparks flying as its claws dug into the steel. They hit the sub-basement. The air here was thick with the gate's energy. It was magnetic. It pulled at the symbiote's metallic elements. There, at the end of the corridor, the main rift pulsed. It was a massive, glowing wound in the wall, pulsating with orange light. But standing in front of it were the Guardians, 3 Demogorgons, larger than the others, the Royal Guard. They screeched, blocking the path. Venom stopped. It put Will down gently in the corner. "Protect the boy," Venom told 11. "I will," she said. Venom stood up to its full height. It was tired. It was poisoned. It was outnumbered. And it was furious. "We are Venom," it snarled. "And you are in our way." The 3 monsters charged. Venom met the center one with a clothesline tackle, slamming it into the concrete floor. The other 2 flanked. One bit Venom's shoulder, the other clawed at its back. Venom roared in pain. The teeth sank deep, bypassing the armor and grazing 11's skin. She cried out. The pain triggered the rage. Venom grabbed the biting Demogorgon by the jaws. It pulled. With a wet, tearing sound, it ripped the creature's lower jaw off. It spun, using the jawbone as a shiv to stab the second attacker in the eye. The third one, the one on the floor, tried to get up. 11 reached out. She squeezed her hand. Telekinesis grabbed the monster. She lifted it into the air. Venom saw the assist. It bonded the psychic hold with physical action. It shot a web line, attaching the floating Demogorgon to the ceiling fan. 11 twisted her wrist. The monster's neck snapped. 3 down. But the tunnel was shaking. The Mind Flayer was close. It was trying to push through the walls. "Move!" Venom grabbed Will again. They ran toward the glowing orange light. The membrane was thick. It resisted. Venom pushed. It felt like walking through solid rubber. "Push!" 11 screamed. They broke through. The transition was violent. One moment, cold and toxic ash. The next, sterile white light and the smell of antiseptic. They tumbled out of the gate onto the floor of the containment room in Hawkins Lab. Venom collapsed, the suit receding instantly to reveal 11. She was gasping, covered in grey slime. Will rolled away, unconscious but breathing. The room was silent. 11 looked up. She wasn't alone. Dr. Brenner was standing there. Behind him stood a platoon of MPs, and behind them, men in white hazmat suits with flamethrowers. They had been waiting. They had been watching the radar. They knew something was coming through. Brenner looked down at 11. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. "Welcome home, 11, he said softly. He looked at Will. "Secure the boy," he ordered. 2 men moved forward to grab Will. 11 tried to raise her hand, but she was empty. The fight in the Upside Down had drained her. The symbiote was dormant, recovering from the toxicity. "Don't touch him," she rasped. Brenner knelt down. He was close enough to touch her. "You did well," he said. "You retrieved the asset. You proved the utility of the bond. But you are sick. Look at you." 11 looked at her arms. The black veins were grey. The infection from the hive mind was still in her system. "We can fix you," Brenner said, "but you have to let us help. You have to go back in the box." 11 looked at the flamethrowers. She looked at Will. She realized the trap. They weren't going to kill her. They were going to weaponize her. They were going to use venom to explore the Upside Down, to conquer it. "No," she whispered. Brenner stood up. "Take them." The soldiers moved in. Suddenly, the alarms blared. Not the containment alarm, the intruder alarm. Explosions rocked the upper levels. Gunfire echoed down the ventilation shafts. Brenner frowned. "What is that?" The radio crackled. "Sir, we have a breach. A vehicle just crashed through the main gate." "What vehicle?" A pace car, sir. And a police cruiser, Hopper. And the boys." The cavalry had arrived, but they were arriving into a slaughterhouse. Brenner looked at 11. "It seems your friends have come to die," he said. He turned to the flamethrower team. "Burn the infection out of her, but keep the host alive." The pilot light on the flamethrower clicked on. The blue flame hissed. 11 closed her eyes. She reached deep inside. "Wake up," she begged the symbiote, "please." "Sleep," the symbiote mumbled. "Drunk on toxic biomass. Tired. They will burn us," 11 thought. "Fire." The word woke the alien up. "Yes, fire." The symbiote didn't have enough energy to form the suit. It didn't have enough mass. But it had something else. It had the connection to the hive mind. The connection it had established by eating the vine. It couldn't fight the men, but maybe it could call for help. It was a desperate, insane gambit, to call the enemy to save them from the enemy. Venom reached out through the psychic link. It screamed into the void. It screamed at the Demogorgons on the other side of the wall. "Open." The gate behind them flared. The membrane stretched. A hand, a grey clawed hand, punched through the portal from the inside. Then another. The Demogorgons hadn't stopped hunting. They had just hit the door. And now, Venom had unlocked it. Brenner spun around. The soldiers raised their weapons. The room descended into chaos. The monsters from the Upside Down poured into the lab, driven by the scent of the clinter and the call of the hive. Venom wrapped around 11's legs, forming boots to help her run. "Run," Venom hissed. "Let them fight." 11 grabbed Will. She dragged him toward the maintenance door as the room erupted in gunfire and screams. She had made a choice. She had saved Will, but in doing so, she had brought the war home. The invasion wasn't a slow creep anymore. It was a prison break, and she was the one who had given the prisoners the key. This ended not with a victory, but with a collapse of containment. The small choice to feed on the vine had linked Venom to the Mind Flayer, and the choice to use that link to escape Brenner had unleashed the swarm. 11 dragged Will through the corridors, the sounds of the massacre echoing behind her. She was exhausted, infected, and terrified, but she was alive. And somewhere upstairs, Mike was screaming her name. She had to get to him before the monsters did. The convergence was here, and there would be no clean victory. The alarms in Hawkins National Laboratory were no longer a warning. They were a death knell. The sub-basement corridor was a strobe-lit tunnel of carnage. 11 dragged Will's unconscious body across the linoleum, her bare feet slipping in the mixture of sprinkler water and blood. The symbiote was unable to fully manifest the suit. The toxicity from the upside-down biomass it had consumed was acting like a neurotoxin, causing the black substance to spasm and dissolve into grey sludge that dripped from 11's shoulders. She was not a warrior anymore. She was a refugee carrying a corpse. Behind them, the blast doors to the containment room were buckling. The Demogorgons were not just hunting. They were swarming. The psychic scream Venom had unleashed to open the gate had worked too well. It had rung the dinner bell for every predator within a 3-mile radius of the rift. 11 turned the corner and collided with a wall of tactical gear. It was Jim Hopper. The chief of police raised his assault rifle, his finger tightening on the trigger before he recognized the terrified eyes beneath the shifting black grime. Joyce Byers was right behind him, her face a mask of desperate terror. She didn't see the monster. She saw her son. Joyce dropped to her knees, skidding across the wet floor, and pulled Will from 11's grip. She checked his breathing. It was shallow, rattling with the fluid of the alternate dimension, but he was alive. Hopper looked at 11. He saw the black veins pulsing on her neck. He saw the way the shadows clung to her skin like oil. He didn't understand it, but he understood the threat. He grabbed 11 by the shoulder, spinning her around as a Demogorgon burst through the ceiling tiles 20 feet away. "Move!" Hopper roared, firing a burst of automatic fire into the creature's chest. The bullets did nothing but annoy the beast. It shrieked, its petal face opening to reveal the abyss. Venom sensed the threat. Despite the sickness, the survival instinct kicked in. A black tentacle shot out from 11's back, not to attack, but to grab a heavy fire extinguisher from the wall. The tentacle whipped it forward with the velocity of a cannonball. The cylinder slammed into the Demogorgon's open maw and exploded in a cloud of white chemical dust. The monster choked, blinded and disoriented. It wasn't a kill, but it was a delay. The group scrambled toward the freight elevator. The boys, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas, were waiting there, holding the doors open with a crowbar. They had broken in with Hopper, armed with wrist rockets and a stolen taser, but they were woefully underpowered for a war zone. Mike's eyes went wide when he saw 11. She looked broken. The duality was failing. Her left eye was human, weeping tears of exhaustion. Her right eye was covered by the white patch of the symbiote, twitching erratically. "Get in!" Lucas screamed. They piled into the industrial elevator. Hopper slammed his fist onto the button for the ground floor. The gears groaned. The cage began to rise just as the corridor filled with the screeching pack of monsters. They threw themselves against the mesh of the elevator shaft, their claws sparking against the metal. Venom hissed in 11's mind, a sound like grinding stones. "Up," the alien voice rasped. "Up is good. Fire below." But the ride was short. The elevator shuddered and stopped between level 2 and level 1. The lights flickered and died. The power had been cut. "They cut the line," Dustin whispered in the dark. "Not they," 11 said, her voice overlapping with the gravelly resonance of Venom. "Him." The ceiling hatch of the elevator was ripped open. It wasn't a monster. It was a canister. Gas grenade. It dropped into the cage, spinning and hissing. "Masks," Hopper yelled, pulling his shirt over his nose. Venom reacted faster than human reflexes allowed. The black sludge expanded, forming a bubble around 11, Will, and Joyce. It filtered the tear gas, breaking down the chemical compounds instantly. But Hopper and the boys were exposed. They fell to the floor, coughing and retching, their eyes burning. The symbiote wanted to leave them. It calculated the oxygen cost of protecting the others. It decided they were dead weight. "Leave them," Venom commanded. "We climb." "No," 11 screamed internally. "Pack." She forced the symbiote to extend its reach. The black mass stretched thin, creating localized masks over Mike and the others. It was a massive strain. 11's nose began to bleed, a thick crimson stream that mixed with the black ooze. She looked up at the open hatch. Flashlights blinded her. "Target secured," a voice called down. "Flush them out." Brenner. He wasn't letting them leave. He was willing to gas his own facility to keep his assets. Venom roared, a sound that shook the elevator shaft. The symbiote shot tendrils up the cables, bypassing the mechanical winch. It pulled. With a screech of tearing metal, the elevator car was yanked upward by brute strength, smashing through the brake clamps. They flew past the first floor and crashed into the lobby ceiling. The doors buckled outward. 11 fell out of the elevator, collapsing onto the polished marble of the main atrium. The lobby was filled with soldiers. A dozen rifles were trained on her. Behind the soldiers stood Dr. Brenner, calm and clinical in the middle of the apocalypse. He was flanked by the heavy containment unit, men in lead-lined suits carrying flamethrowers. "Papa," 11 whispered. Brenner stepped forward. The gas had cleared in the large room. He looked at the creature his daughter had become. He looked at the boys choking on the floor behind her. He looked at Will Byers, limp in his mother's arms. "It's over, 11, Brenner said. "You can't run anymore. You are sick. The organism is destabilizing. Look at yourself. You are melting." He was right. The bond was fraying. The hive mind infection from the vine was fighting the Clintar biology. 11's skin was burning. She felt like she was being torn apart at the molecular level. "Let us go," Mike croaked, standing up shakily. He moved to stand in front of 11, a small shield against an army. Brenner ignored him. He looked at the flamethrowers. "Burn the others," Brenner ordered. "Isolate the host." The soldiers hesitated. These were children, but the flamethrower operators were different. They had seen what happened in the gym. They knew the threat level. They stepped forward, pilot lights clicking. Hopper raised his rifle, but he was outgunned. "Drop it," he yelled, knowing it was futile. The flamethrowers roared. Streams of liquid fire arched toward the group. Time slowed down. 11 saw the fire. She felt the symbiote's terror. Fire was the end. Fire was death. But she also felt the symbiote's pride. It was a predator. It was a king. It would not die cowering. "Shield," 11 screamed. The symbiote did not form a wall this time. It didn't have the mass. Instead, it stripped itself from 11's body, tearing away from her pores in a violently painful separation. It launched itself into the air, forming a spinning disk of black biomass in front of the group. The fire hit the disk. Venom screamed. The sound was not of this earth. It was the sound of a living planet dying. The biomass boiled, charred, and hardened, turning into a crusted shield of carbon. It blocked the flames for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough. 11, stripped of her armor, felt the cold air on her skin. She felt the raw vulnerability, but she also felt the anger. The symbiote was dying for her. The monster was saving the human. She reached out with her mind. She didn't reach for the soldiers. She reached for the building. She grabbed the structural supports of the atrium. She grabbed the steel beams hidden behind the drywall. She screamed, and the glass of the lobby windows shattered inward. "Crumble," she commanded. The ceiling above the soldiers gave way. Tons of concrete and steel rained down on the tactical team. The flamethrower tanks were crushed. One ruptured, exploding in a fireball that consumed the blocking force. Brenner was thrown backward by the blast, disappearing into the dust and smoke. "Run!" Hopper yelled. They sprinted toward the shattered glass doors. The night air rushed in, cold and clean. They scrambled over the debris, cutting their hands on the glass. They spilled out into the parking lot, coughing and gasping. Behind them, the lab was collapsing. But it wasn't just gravity. The gate in the basement was tearing the foundation apart. The rift was widening, shaking the earth. They reached the bus. Hopper's police blazer was totaled, but the van the boys had stolen from the repair shop was there. They threw Will into the back. Joyce climbed in. Dustin and Lucas scrambled into the passenger seats. Mike looked back. Elle was standing in the parking lot. She wasn't moving. Elle, Mike screamed, get in. She was looking at the ground. A puddle of black sludge was inching toward her. It was small, burnt, and shivering. It was venom. It had survived the fire, but barely. It was a scorched remnant of its former self. 11 knelt down. She offered her hand. The sludge hesitated. It sensed the damage it had done to her. It sensed the infection. Home, 11 whispered. The symbiote crawled up her arm. It didn't sink in. It wrapped around her wrist like a thick, black bracelet. It was too weak to bond fully. It was dormant. 11 stood up. She ran to the van. Mike pulled her inside. Hopper floored the gas. The van peeled out of the parking lot just as the main roof of the laboratory collapsed inward. A plume of dust and smoke rose into the night sky, illuminated by the fires burning in the wreckage. They didn't look back. They drove in silence, the adrenaline crashing into shock. They drove to the buyer's house. It was compromised, but it was the only place they had. They carried Will inside and laid him on the couch. Joyce checked his temperature. He was freezing. He's cold, she whispered. He's so cold. 11 sat in the corner of the room. She was shaking. The black bracelet on her wrist was motionless. Mike sat next to her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew she wasn't. Is it dead? Dustin asked, looking at her wrist. Sleeping, 11 said softly, hurt. Lucas looked out the window. The lights in the town were flickering. The power grid was failing. It's not over, Lucas said. The gate. We didn't close it. We just buried it. He was right. The ground beneath the house trembled. A low hum vibrated through the floorboards. 11 closed her eyes. She could still feel the hive mind. It was angry. It had been denied its prize. The connection Venom had made was still there, a thin, psychic thread tying her to the shadow monster. She saw it in her mind, the giant spider shape standing over the ruins of the lab. It wasn't staying in the upside down anymore. It was leaking through. We have to leave, 11 said, opening her eyes. Hawkins, we have to leave. No, Hopper said. He was loading a shotgun at the kitchen table. The military is locking down the perimeter. I heard it on the radio before the tower went down. No one gets out. They're turning this town into a quarantine zone. Then we fight, Mike said. With what? Dustin asked. Elle is drained. The suit is cooked. We have a wrist rocket and a shotgun against an army of Demogorgons and a shadow god. We have fire, Lucas said. We know it hates heat. Hopper looked at Will. Will was coughing. He rolled onto his side and retched into a bucket. A slug, a small larval thing, fell out of his mouth. It slithered around the plastic. 11 stared at the slug. Venom stirred on her wrist. A tiny spike of black liquid rose up, pointing at the slug. Spy, Venom's voice whispered in her head. It was faint, like a ghost. Kill the spy. 11 crushed the slug with her mind. The victory was not clean. They had retrieved Will, but he was a carrier. They had escaped the lab, but the lab had fallen to the enemy. They had survived the government, but now they were trapped in a town that was rapidly becoming a colony of another dimension. Hopper stood up. We need supplies. We need gas. We need to fortify. Where? Joyce asked. The middle school, Mike said. It has a generator. It has food. And it has the radio. If we can reach the radio, Dustin said, maybe we can call for help. Real help, not the government. Who? Lucas asked. The Avengers? No, Dustin said grimly. The press. If we leak this, if we tell the world what happened, they can't nuke the town. It was a slim hope, a desperate strategy, but it was all they had. 11 stood up. She felt the weight of the night pressing down on her. She looked at Mike. He held her hand. His hand was warm. Her hand was cold. "Friends," she whispered. "Friends," Mike confirmed. But as they prepared to move out, 11 felt a shift in the atmosphere. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in a second. The lights in the house exploded. Darkness fell. And in the darkness, the walls began to stretch. The wallpaper peeled back to reveal the grey, webbing-covered reality underneath. The house wasn't shifting into the upside down. The upside down was shifting into the house. The convergence had begun. Hopper racked the shotgun. "Back to back," he yelled. They formed a circle in the living room. 11 raised her hand, summoning the last dregs of her energy. The black bracelet expanded, covering just her hand, turning it into a clawed gauntlet. "Come and get it," she hissed. The windows shattered. The Demogorgons poured in. The fight for the lab was lost. The fight for the town had begun. And in the center of the storm, a girl and her monster stood ready to die for the only thing that mattered. The pack. This was the new reality. No secret experiments, no quiet suburbs. Just a war of survival between the biological imperative of the Clintar, the psychic tyranny of the Mind Flayer, and the fragile, stubborn hope of a few broken humans. 11 screamed, a sound of pure defiance, and the shadows rushed in to meet her. The story did not end with a period. It ended with a tear in the fabric of the world that would never be stitched back together. The official government report, redacted and filed under the highest level of clearance at the Department of Energy, classified the incident of November 1983 as a localized geological event compounded by a biological contaminant leak. To the rest of the world, Hawkins, Indiana, ceased to exist as a habitable town on December 10th. The National Guard erected a perimeter of concrete barriers and razor wire 3 miles out from the town center. Signs warning of radiation and chemical toxicity were posted every 50 yards. The media was fed a story about a reactor meltdown, a convenient lie that kept the curious away and explained the sudden evacuation of the population. But the perimeter was not built to keep people out. It was built to keep the infection in. Inside the exclusion zone, the winter did not bring snow. It brought ash. The sky above the town remained a bruised purple, obscured by a permanent cloud layer that blocked out the sun. The air tasted of ozone and rotting vegetation. The ecosystem had been aggressively terraformed. The trees of Mirkwood were gone, replaced by twisting, serpentine structures of grey organic matter that pulsed with a faint bioluminescent light. In the ruins of the middle school, a small fire burned in a barrel in the gymnasium. Jim Hopper sat cleaning his rifle, his beard grown thick and unkempt. Across the room, Joyce Byers was sorting through scavenging rations, canned beans, stale crackers, and batteries. They were no longer citizens. They were insurgents living in occupied territory. The boys, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas, slept on gym mats, their youth stripped away by the month-long siege. They carried radios not to play games, but to monitor the encrypted channels of the containment teams that patrolled the streets in hazmat suits, burning anything that moved. Will Byers sat apart from them. He spent his days drawing. He didn't draw wizards or dragons anymore. He drew maps of tunnels that didn't exist yet, maps of a shadow world that overlapped their own. He was the radar, the unwilling spy who could feel the movements of the hive mind before they happened. The shadow monster had not fully crossed over, but it was watching. It was waiting for the winter to get colder. High above them, on the water tower that overlooked the dead town, the Guardian watched. 11 sat on the metal rim, her legs dangling over the edge. She wore a heavy military jacket taken from a fallen soldier, but she didn't feel the cold. The symbiote had fully recovered, fed by the constant hunting of the stray demo dogs that roamed the streets at night. The bond had settled into a permanent equilibrium. The black substance no longer hid beneath her skin. It was a part of her, a living armor that shifted and hardened with her mood. The duality of the white patch on her eye was gone. Her eyes were now entirely black, reflecting the dark sky, only shifting to human brown when she looked at the school where her friends were hiding. They were the pack. She was the wolf. Venom spoke in the silence of their shared mind. The voice was no longer a separate entity, but a harmonious chord in her own thoughts. "We are the immune system," it whispered. "We are the cure." 11 looked at her hand. The claws extended slowly, black obsidian catching the faint light of the red lightning that flickered in the clouds. She knew the government would come back. She knew the Mind Flayer was gathering its strength in the tunnels beneath the library. But she was no longer the scared little girl in the hospital gown. She was the apex predator of the Hawkins exclusion zone. She stood up, the symbiote flowing over her like a liquid shadow, forming the mask, the teeth, the monster. A patrol of soldiers was moving down Maple Street, their flamethrowers lighting up the dark. 11 tilted her head. The hunger was there, sharp and necessary, but it was controlled. Tonight, they would feast. Tonight, the legend of the Black Ghost would grow. The experiment was over. The evolution had begun.